Hi, Gina. It's so great to see you.
Yes, it's great to see you too.
So tell me what brought you to kind of even explore GTD coaching? I would
Sure.
love to really hear again what kind of was going on in your life that would even kind of say, hey, I want to go explore this one-on-one coaching.
Absolutely. So I am a creative at heart. So what happens in that role, I found this out with you, Meg, actually, was as we were doing the personality assessment, the Kairos, and you were able to tell me that, oh, you have to be moving when you're very actively dominant in these areas. And it made so much sense to me. It's the first time anybody had ever broken that down. So what led me here was a guy at work gave me the Getting Things Done book. And he said, oh, Gina, I think this would be really great because I started wearing a lot more hats at work. And I think this will help you. And he said, I said, okay. But then, I never made time to do it. And so I just sat there and sat there. And then I got a free credit on my Audible. And I said, well, let me just do this when I go on my walks every day. And then it was right after COVID. And you have to remember that COVID happened and everybody's life was turned upside down. But before that happened, maybe 5 or 8 years before that, we were taking care of two sick parents. I was trying to have a baby and I kept miscarrying. And so we had just backed up with, thing after thing after thing after thing. And I just felt like everything was unraveling and I felt very overwhelmed and am about to cry because this helped me so much. And you'll see why. Because when I re-listened to the book and I started to listen to what he was actually talking about, it started to really click in my head. And I started to say, wait, this is me. It was almost as if it was written about me. It was like, oh, you start projects and it will take, you'll get really going on something, but then, it'll peter out. And it exactly felt like it was speaking to me. So I said, oh gosh, I've got to look up a little bit more. And it just, when I looked it up, I have to say, like, I watch every dollar because I'm a creative and COVID affected entertainment so much that I thought, oh, that's a lot of money to spend on something like this. But I researched it a bit more and I felt like pulling the trigger. And when I did, I could not believe I would have paid more, just so you know. It helped me from the very first week. So I would tell and to tell people out in the world, the reason it helped me was because everything felt like we'd had a plumbing incident, COVID happened, our house was just full of fertility stuff from both parents, like, from both parents' houses. And so we're just like kind of trapped and cramped in this place. And we actually have a pretty, large house, but it was just full of stuff. And we just kept looking at it. And it was so daunting that, we felt like hoarders, but we're not going to ever do it. Like it just felt so, so much. So then, as I was reading the book, I said, well, let me give this a try. Let me just see if it works. And I started to kind of do this mind sweep. And and I'm like, oh my gosh. And as I read the book, he says, oh, there's some people who do the mind sweep and they have 100 things on their list or 600 or 5. And I'm like, I have thousands. I literally had thousands of things on my mind sweep. And I didn't realize I was just taking on so much. And I asked you in one session, Meg, like, how did I do this long without getting things done? And you said, because you're a badass. But, it was like, I was like, I don't even know how I did it because with your system, everything's so quick and easy. It's crazy. I know that it sounds like I drank the Kool-Aid, but I did. And it's like, but it was so good. So
When we first started working together, and you kind of referred at the beginning to the Kairos assessment that we've been using for probably 20 years,
yeah.
because we found that if we really understood people's cognitive preferences, it would really accelerate the installation of GTD because we didn't have to kind of intuit our way through, what would be the best tool for you, what would be
Yes.
the best list for you. And when you and I first began to, talk, I think that there's always this sense of I have to be electronic, I was
Yes.
just like, oh, you are so paper-based person.
It was incredible. It was like permission. It was like you gave me permission to know, because what I was doing before I found you, I started this in November. So I don't know if I told you that or not, but I started in November and I downloaded the Trello and I downloaded the, Microsoft Teams and all the things because people did a great job and they made all these wonderful cloud, workflow apps. And I love that. Couldn't do one of them. And so I was like, so that's why I called you because I'm like, I'm not I'm there. I've clarified. I didn't feel like I had clean edges when I worked with you. I had clean edges, but before that, like I was doing it, and I'm like, this is all making sense, but for some reason, I'm just not tracking it. And it was because I was trying to do it electronically, and I really am very analog. It's just how my brain works better. I
Yeah, and
think
then
it's the
this,
doing with my
yeah,
hand or
and then
something.
I
Yeah,
think that once we got the tool set up, I think then what was so interesting is that it was such a cognitive leap for you
yeah,
to not have your projects and project plans and next actions there.
yeah,
Because I think that depending on the tool, you kind of pull out the next action and put it on your next action list, unless
yes,
the tool, connects that, which some of them do. And what I really loved was being able to so customize it for you to be able to say, for right now, let's have that ad hoc next actions list. But because you want things so associatively connected,
yes.
that we were able to really manipulate and customize that paper-based planner, because my job as a coach is to figure out, how do you think when you're going to do work?
Hmm. Yeah.
So when you're going to do work and you've got all of this stuff that you need to do, remember we talked about you going up to the areas of focus and responsibilities because
Yes.
there's less
There's
volume up there,
yes.
right? And that really helped you kind of with the prioritizations, because you're like, well, do I work on mom, and do I work on
Yes.
job, and do I work
Yes.
on my health and all that kind of stuff? And so
Yes.
what was a little bit of the what were some of the other takeaways? And then I'd love to kind of hear where you are now with your practice, because you and I
Yeah.
have been having some email exchange.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the most interesting thing to me, if this will help anybody, first of all, the personalization was perfect, and I think that that's what got me over the hump. So what I couldn't do on my own was just for you out in the world. The thing Meg helped me with the most was we were able to look at my personality. We were able to say, I don't think exactly the way other people do. I think very much in what's in front of me. I think with all of my senses, but I didn't know that. And when you're taking a test or you're reading or you're doing whatever you're doing, you input information in a variety of ways. But what I found out is I put information in from all of my senses simultaneously at this, quite a bit. Speaking is a big thing for me. So if I'm stuck, Meg advised me just to call somebody up and bounce something off of each other. That has been immensely helpful. Like that's insane because I just always make all of the decisions all day long, and I'm like I question myself constantly. So I think bouncing it off of somebody just makes me make sure that I'm in the right ballpark, And so I think that that's where I find myself stuck a lot. So we were able to find that out. We were able, the biggest things that helped me is as I'm doing everything, because I am so associative, it was so good to like, I actually made a new list. I haven't told you this, but I call it a keeping an eye out list. And that's because every time I'm doing something, I'm like, oh, this would be really cool if I had a little, box to put this in, or a basket, just so it could sit here and look pretty, or whatever it would be. And I would have a keep an eye out list, so that as I was kind of culling things from the house, I was able to find things that I also had to keep an eye out for that I could use for other things. So that was helpful. And it was just so good to have everything all in one place. It feels, I was telling you this during one of our sessions, but it feels like I am the hub of my home. Like I have everything. I know what's going on with every little thing and where everything is. And I've never been like that in my whole entire life. So
Well, that was the part that I think was so moving for me working with you, is you felt like for the first time you could really wrap your arms around what you
yeah,
had created in this really big, wonderful life that you're living.
yeah,
And that you always felt so kind of overwhelmed and out of control. And there wasn't kind of like a path for you
yeah,
to wrap around the physical,
yeah,
all the physicality and the stuff that you had with your mom. And then
yes,
it was really hard to wrap around separating the current versus the backlog, so that when we were
yes,
able to just, really distinguish your current and your backlog, and everybody defines that differently, then that was so less overwhelming, so that you just had a small amount of emails and paper to clarify and organize versus, hundreds of hours of backlog.
yeah.
Although you, during the 4 months, you were just so rocking and rolling on all of your
Well,
backlog.
I had made a commitment, and and I'm like, I'm spending money and I'm making a time commitment. Why not make sure you do it? And then I was like, and every time I would get overwhelmed, I was like, trust the process, trust Meg, trust the process, because that is 100% what I did, what I felt. I felt completely safe. I felt completely supported. I felt I could tell you anything because everything from your whole life you bring in with you. So there was a lot of emotion, and there was a lot of things that I wanted to keep close that were touching or emotional for me, and that I didn't want to let go of, but that I felt this pressure to perhaps sort of, purge or what have you. And this gave such freedom to be able to say, I'd like to keep my mom's recipes. I don't want to purge those. And I just need to put them in a place that makes sense. And it was just so great to have that freedom, almost that permission. I guess in my head, I'm thinking, you start to sort of make all of the decisions all day long. And some of the decisions start to be influenced by, oh, you shouldn't have all this stuff. And it's like, no, you can have all that stuff. You just have it organized a little bit better or a little easier. Does that make sense?
That you're able to manage what you've created.
Yeah. And that you feel like if somebody says to you, hey, where's the hammer? You know where that is. You don't have to worry about finding it in a stack full of tools, so it's crazy. But it sounds so simple when you finally, I was looking at it, and it just seems so simple to make a book with all of your projects. It seems, but it wasn't. So it was beautiful to have you guide me every step of the way.
What's interesting is when you talk about the Kairos being a personality, it actually gets underneath personality and emotions, and it's really about your preference.
Oh, interesting.
It's kind of like, your preference, are you right-handed or left-handed? And so the reason why I want to know this is if you're a lefty, I don't want to set you up as a righty.
Well, can I ask you this? If it's more of a preference, how if you're a righty, you can be taught to do left-handed, but it's just like you automatically lean to go to right.
Exactly.
Is that kind of the same thing?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's why it's more of a preference.
Okay.
So for me as a coach, really understanding your cognitive preferences allows me to accelerate how I might coach you, not only on what the tool you're going to use or the lists that you're going to use. And you want to have not too many, but you want to have enough.
Yep. So, and kind of like the extra list you gave me for have your next project or your next action support list, which was huge, which I wouldn't have done.
Exactly. So I organized it in a way that made sense to you cognitively, because you're going to do work. These are focusing lists. So when you're going to focus and do work, you want to be able to look at a list and it kind of reflect back the way that you think.
Yes.
And if I set you up in a way that you have a disconnect where it's like, well, wait a minute, I don't think that way. So now these lists don't really have much meaning, which has happened in the past. So
it happened to me with the first time I tried it. It happened. I got stuck, and it just wasn't making sense for me, so I abandoned it. So
exactly. So that's what I think really is been the game changer for us in terms of helping people make this work for them, was by incorporating the Kairos assessment, so that we understood people's preferences. And you really experienced that.
Yeah, I really, really experienced it, like 100%, because I was about to put it down, and I literally, it was so funny. That was the bonus I got. I was like, well, that's my bonus, and it was like, I felt like it was kismet. So, I said, all right, well, I wouldn't have had it anyway. So,
Yeah. And an example of that is, for example, because you have that really dominant talking preference, when you had a next action that was sitting there, and you thought that the next action was to draft something, or the next action was to write something, and it would sit there. And when we would have follow-up calls, and we were like looking at those lists of things that were drifting, or that they were just not moving forward, even though you wanted to see it as an option. And then I said, well, geez, because I also have that dominant talking preference too. One of the things I've really learned that a lot of times my next action is, who can I talk to?
Yes.
And that really resonated with you.
Really?
So by understanding your preferences, a lot of times your next actions change.
Yes.
So many times in the past, I would have a next action. And now, by understanding my preference, my next actions is shifted. And so again, my expertise is not in the cognitive preferences. My expertise is, how do your cognitive preferences bump up against your GTD practice?
Yep.
That's just an example.
You nailed it. Like, you literally nailed it.
Example. Yeah. And that's been what has made, I think, GTD one of the big pieces to make it stick.
So I would love if I could say something, if I could offer this to anybody that is planning to do it, it's exactly that. If you feel that the way that you do things is opposite of the way most other people do them, and that's what I experienced my whole life. It works well for creative things, but when it comes to organization or sort of checklists or things like that, it's a little bit different when your brain is all over the place. But when you can take it and then you can utilize it in a system that works for your brain, it's like magic, because it was literally made for me. It was literally set up with me in mind, and with you, and you listened really well, and help to understand me, help to get to know me, get to know why I am the way that I am, which influences so much. And it's just, and you made me feel like it's not normal to be the way that, how many times in my life I get called weird or whatever. I'm a creative, so it is what it is. It comes with the territory. I like the weird in me. I like being able to think outside of the box and finding all kinds. But I also love now that I can take that weird and I can funnel it, and kind of put it towards really great things.
Exactly. You're able to ground it now, and you're not kind of floating around with that we talked about earlier about feeling overwhelmed. Now you've got this laser focus where in some ways you are getting the right things done that you want to in a much more efficient and effective way, because it's been set up to your preferences. And this is really kudos to David Allen as well, because I love that. I think one of the best things I really love about the Getting Things Done methodology is there's no rules, but best practices.
Yes.
So within those best practices, the customization of it, but being able to still stay within the best practices. I think that so many people who are, as you say, very creative, they got too creative.
And it just, I started to do, if I'm being honest,
they made it more complicated, and I look at it and I was like, whoa, okay.
I started to do that until I read the part. I have the book and the audio, and I read the part that was like, try not to make too many topics or what have you. And I was like, yep, okay. That is me. So yeah, it was great. So, and then in terms of, the big thing was that I wanted to do is I just have all these creative ideas, and whenever I have them, I like to make them into a project or into a thing or into, write it or sing it or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, I've just not done that in a long time. And so this freed my brain up. The creativity is just there now. It's not even that I have to stop what I'm doing and get into that mode. And there are exercises, I mean, we teach them at the theater, that we can do to get into a creative mode, but if you don't even have to, because you're already on top of it and you feel good, it just flows. Such a flow. What a flow. That's the best word that I can think of.
And what have you noticed with your team members, or what have your team members noticed with you now, pre and post, as director?
I actually asked them that because I knew I was going to be talking with you, and they just said that I feel lighter. They said it just feels like I'm back to myself, that and I feel bad. I do feel, and I know we had a lot of heavy stuff these last 7 or 8 years, and I realized that that's part of me not being as light as I used to be. However, that wasn't all of it, and it was just all of this other stuff just kind of looming, and so they've said I've just been lighter, just been more jovial, and that kind of thing. So this was eye-opening for me, and a game changer, literally a game changer.